Hi everyone, it's Natalie here. Welcome. So this week we're looking at the Chariot. The Chariot and the Sevens in the Mariel Tarot are really important. I would say they're important in every deck, right? Seven is such an important number in the tarot. But they're also important in this deck because of Marie White's use of the metaphor of the chariot, right? So we know that she's using a particular metaphor of the chariot when she talks about the aces and the magician, because she's talking there specifically about Ezekiel's chariot. When we get to the sevens, she's shifting her metaphor a little bit here, and she's talking more about Plato's metaphor. She's mixing her metaphors. She's mixing two different mythologies in her chariot. She's mixing Plato's mythology, where he talks about the chariot. And she is also mixing in a lot of Norse mythology as well. Let us slow down and simply examine what we have here in the Chariot card. So what we have in the Chariot, just from a pure, what's here, what exists, we have 3 white dogs and we have 1 black dog. We can see the 2 white dogs wanting to move in different directions, but we have 1 white dog that stares directly at us, and the black dog also stares directly at us. And you'll notice too that whatever this is behind her, maybe it's a cape. I've always thought of it as a cape. It's encompassing all of the dogs, right? So she is supposed to be our charioteer, and she is holding all 4 of these dogs together. We also see that her heart space is very highlighted here. You know, there's almost like a chrysanthemum or a lotus flower growing out of her heart. Her head looks a lot like a lion's mane, her hair, which, as I understand it, is intended to be a little bit like the sun. So Marie White does talk in her blurb in the book. Let's see, it would be page. So on page 34 in the first edition book. It's the second column and the second to last paragraph is where I'm going. But in the second sentence it says the body, charioteer is threefold: a black dark bottom, that part covered in flesh and earth, the exposed soul of the heart in the middle, and the radiant sun of the mind. The wolves are the fourfold earth, the cardinal directions, the 4 directions we can move, our arms and legs we interact with reality with, the 4 elements. Okay, let's decode it, right? Let's decode what it's saying. She's basically saying that the body of the charioteer itself is 4 different things. So the body is one thing. Then we have the black part of it, right, which is the lower half of her body covered in this fabric. Then we have the upper part of it, right, which is this white crown, you know. And then we have the middle part of it, which is her heart space. So if we're looking at the analogy of the charioteer, we have the dark human aspects of the subconscious here in the body, which also connect the body, the whole entirety of the physical body, to the earth. Then we have the heavenly aspect or the godly aspect of who and what the charioteer is, okay? And then we have the heart space, and the heart space is what ultimately commands the chariot, okay? Then she's talking about, so I think that's what she's saying. Then the wolves are in themselves representing the 4 directions of the earth and of the human body's, you know, ability to move, right? So the vehicle of the chariot of the human body has 4 different limbs, right? 2 arms and 2 legs. So that's that part decoded. So this is kind of an interesting, this use of 4 and this kind of stretch to include it as a 4 so that she can connect it back to Ezekiel more comfortably. It's a little bit of a stretch, but I think she pulls it together, because if we look at Plato's example, and again, I think they're identical in both versions, it would be page 33, first column, and I guess like the third paragraph down that starts with the word Plato. But it says, Plato described the chariot as a metaphor for the soul in 3 parts: a black horse, a white horse, and the charioteer called reason that lashes them together and drives them. The white horse, which is beautiful, well-bred, and civilized, goes up. The black horse, ill-bred, ill-tempered, and hard to control, goes down. So there we have the 2 differences between, you know, where she's going with this and where Plato is going with this. Because it then helps her connect all 4 of these directions to the 4 different minors. So let's look at the minors. In the minors, we have, obviously, I think, right, we have one of the white dogs. I think it's interesting that she's chosen to use additional contrast between these 2 wolves in her analogy, and less of it in this. I'm not exactly sure why she's done that, but in here we're looking at the 7 of Wands as being, you know, the higher part of who we are. So she says on page 110 in the first version, and I'll have the second edition page numbers below. At the bottom of 110, she says, Plato also describes each god having their own chariot, and each is drawn by white horses only, implying that the white horse is divine or of spirit, as opposed to the black horse, which is the gross world. Okay, so men are dual in this way. The difference is we have reason. Okay, and reason is what gives us the choice between the higher self and the gross self, or the lower self. I think too that it's interesting that she's given us a dog here or wolf here with the green eyes that look directly into our souls and doesn't give us the opportunity not to see that highest aspect and be held kind of accountable in that way, right? Which is what that stare does. The 7 of Cups, however, gives us this, you know, sort of hellhound looking wolf, which actually looks a lot like my dog Noah if he's in a bad mood, in particularly bad mood, but has his sort of wonderful face shape there as well. But this one, you know, is not, it's indirect, right? We have a direct one, we have an indirect, right? Wands as an item, right? This is direct. There's no indirect about it. It goes in, it goes through, it strikes, etc. That's what wands do, or clubs. The 7 of Cups, however, let's see if I can find myself a little vessel here. Well, I have a glass, right? Ooh, let's not knock over all the stuff, Nat. Okay, the cups, however, here's a cup. What do I do? It's round. It's passive. It sits. It exists. It has depth to it, right? This cup shows us how deep it is, but if it, you know, we wouldn't necessarily be able to gauge the depth of this vessel from the outside to know how deep it is or how much water is in there, you know, once you're in it. But it's round. It's on some level, cups are always round. They have a roundness. And things that are round are indirect, because if I trace a line around that roundness, I can't, you know, you don't go directly through. Something, the nature of it itself is not direct. Something else can go, and I won't do it, but, you know, can go directly in or through, right? We get masculine, feminine here. But, you know, or I can drink from it, I can add to it, but the nature of the cup itself is indirect. Looking at this guy, he's indirect. He's looking elsewhere. He's not paying attention directly to us. And that tells us about the nature of the unconscious mind, the subconscious, the way that subconscious impulses go through us. And if we come back to her analogy about the body, right, the lower half of the body, the lower half of the body below the heart space is really pretty, it's very simple. It tends to be, we don't pay a lot of attention to our feet unless they hurt. We don't pay a lot of attention to our legs or hips unless they cause us pain. You know, we pay attention to sexual impulses because they drive us somewhere. Right? Which is another metaphorical analogy. What is it that's driving us in this Seven of Cups? What drives us? What are those primal drives that come out of the physical body, you know, in that place, in that state, from the depths, right? From the lower depths of the body. Is it a physical hunger? Are we physically hungry? The belly is not full. Do you notice how that's happening right about where it's right at the level of the stomach and below? Is there hunger? A deeper hunger? Not an immediate stomach hunger, right? Because her stomach would actually be right about there, but a deeper, nutritional hunger in the body. Is it the need to procreate? Is it the need to physically move or run? Most fight-flight response is going to happen in the body physiologically as a kicking off start. I mean, it spreads, it moves. It's dictated to by the nervous system on some level, by the limbic brain. But the limbic brain inside of the person is connecting really, here down to get that chariot to move, to run. To fight, to flight, or to freeze, or frankly, to fuck. Is it a reproductive need? But they're not, how those all come together in a human body, represented by the wolf, of course, is not direct. We don't, without a lot of in-depth examination, we don't really know how those things come together and how they drive us. Right? We're not really that aware of what that is or how that functions. Now, what I'm about to say I think is interesting, and it's something I thought surely she addresses this somewhere in the book. So I went back to the book and I read the description in all four, the minors and of course the major, the chariot, and it isn't there, right? She's using this analogy of 4 wolves. I don't think it's any accident that there are 3 so-called white wolves and only 1 black wolf. I just don't. And what I feel that she's communicating with that, okay, is that with this evenness of 4 animals, if these 2, if there are 3 of them, it's easier for them to overwhelm the outlier and bring that wolf into the fold. And in other words, in simple language, the good outweighs the bad. That's not exactly the kind of simple language I tend to prefer, but I will say sometimes with clients, that is the closest, fastest way to get them to understand what I'm trying to communicate, right? Now, in her analogy, she split, that's interesting, she's actually tried to split that into 4, right? Remember that difficult paragraph that we talked about earlier. So this takes us back to page 34. Second column, second to last paragraph, right? This is that really bizarre paragraph that I had to translate. The body, charioteer, is threefold: a black, dark bottom, that part covered in flesh and earth, and the exposed soul of the heart in the middle, and the radiant sun of the mind. The wolves are the fourfold earth, the cardinal directions, the 4 directions we can move, our arms and legs we interact with reality with, the 4 elements. Now, she says the body, charioteer is threefold. Okay. She then tells us what that threefold is. But I feel like because of the way she's written it, and I can't, it's not explicit. I'd have to talk to her to know for sure. But I feel like she's tried to find a way to separate the body into four as well by saying the entire thing, top to bottom, of the human body is one thing. Within that, we have then three additional things if we split it up. We have the lower half, we have the heart, and then we have the mind. And the heart is what's bringing these two together and turning it into one thing. Does that make sense? I think that's what she's saying. So she's paying homage to the, Plato's analogy of, the chariot, or the soul, the human soul specifically, as a chariot. But she's also giving us the four that we get with Ezekiel. Okay, if you're confused by what I mean by that, go back to the very beginning, because I talk about that extensively with relationship to the aces and the magician, which I also then cover rather extensively in the videos about the Merkaba spread, because the Merkaba is its own chariot, right? It's the chariot of the gods. So she does talk about that pretty explicitly as well in the description. She talks about that on page 33, the second paragraph at the top of the second column. The Merkaba is the chariot of God in Jewish mysticism, etc. And she talks about the angels and the archetypal relationships there. So we've got our the higher self that is the closest thing to God that we have. That's who we are, right? Or that's within the who that we are. Then we have the unconscious desires, the unconscious part of the chariot that's always moving us down, right? This one's always going up, taking us up in the sense that she's literally drawn it. It's taking us up here, right? The black dog taking us into where she's drawn the black half of the body down, right? There's one pulling up, one pulling down. But then what do we have here? We have a very clear depiction again that there's three white dogs, one black dog, and regardless of what we're doing, if we make the effort to join all of them together, in other words, we're not doing that, right? We're not tossing out the baby with the bathwater, right? We're saying, okay, yes, and yes, right? She's saying, you are all here, you are all me, you are all part of me. Let's put them back. Let's talk about this raven. So this is a wonderful card. We have obviously Master of Higher Self because, and I've given, sorry, I keep jumping around. Master of Higher Self because somebody or something who has mastered something can have that kind of penetrating stare that just looks deeply into your soul and is unmoved. Then we have the Seven of Cups, which is just simply lower self. All right, so we have the Master of the Higher Self, the lower self, and then we have here, we have the charioteer in the form of this raven in the Seven of Swords. And that's interesting. She's chosen a sword, and swords are relating, in this case, to the heart. Remember what I was saying before? White horse wands, the black dog as the lower half or the black horse, and then the heart space as the Seven of Swords, or as the charioteer or the reason. Okay, that's interesting. In Tibetan cosmology, when you learn the practice of Poa, it's a practice of dying. You practice it while you're alive so that as you are physically dying and preparing to leave your body, you can make a conscious choice to be liberated. But in Poa, the brain or the mind lives in the heart. So as you prepare to send your consciousness out of your body at that moment of death, which I would say too is a choice or a function of the chariot, right? Its movement. You are sending it up from the heart space through the breath. So you're using, you're sending it up and out. You're using this part of the body with the breath to push it out and up through a channel at the top of the head, through the crown chakra. So that said, when we look at this Seven of Swords, a magical raven turns itself into a human being, into a form that can be consumed so that he can be born as a human being. Because the world is dark at that time, and the raven wants to find out where the sun is hidden, finds out that it's being hidden by an old man in a treasure box, and the only way to get it and maybe steal it out and bring it to humanity is to play a trick. So this craven this raven uses its ability as a trickster to do something that benefits others, that is altruistic, right? And from that perspective, deeply enlightened and very deeply heart-centered. It's coming from a very heart-centered consciousness. So the raven, when it's born as a child, as a human child, begs the old man, he's born into that family, begs the old man and says, I really, really need to know where you keep that, finds it. He turns back into the raven and is able to capture the sun as a jewel in his beak in order to sneak it out of there and get it into the sky and to turn it loose as the sun. Marie White never directly addresses the snake. Ever. And yet, it's such a prominent aspect of the composition of this card. I feel because, again, we're playing with black and white here. Either the snake is representing the raven as, representing the raven's enlightenment or enlightened nature despite its dark appearance, and is helping thus to carry that raven up towards the sun. Its head is here, has it it's very interesting. This one's going up, this one's going down, however. Right? So it may be that this snake has popped down and pulled the raven ever closer to the sun, or given that, we know that one of the horses goes up, one of the horses goes down, we've done a reversal here of color for whatever reason. It's not a white raven and a black snake, which would actually tie it in with so many other cards. But it's not what she's chosen to do, okay? I wonder if what we're looking at here could be the white horse and the black horse or dark horse, but with the colors reversed. Because of the trickstery nature of the raven. I think it's one or the other. Or both and. I will say that when I'm reading with this card, self-determination is something that is met with obstacles. It's always full of obstacles. The snake crawls on the ground. It's close to the earth, right? But the raven has wings and can therefore fly into the air. So what are the sort of earthly things in our lives that sort of tangle us up, wrap us up, and prevent us from taking, returning our jewel back to the sky, right? Or to climbing to our greatest heights, reaching the level of enlightenment that we want to get to. And regardless, keep in mind, the raven is going to succeed anyway. He does not care a crap about that snake. He's going to get up to the sky with that sun and return it so that light can return to the universe, regardless of what that snake says or does or thinks or feels. And if he has to drag the snake along with him, he'll do it. So frequently what I have in readings when this one pops up is that someone is reaching toward, depending on where it falls, someone's reaching towards their highest possible purpose and meeting with obstacles. And then the cards around it will tell me more about what kinds of obstacles that person may be encountering in trying to reach a goal. But this, because too, we're seeing light and dark flipped and reversed, but still present, and we've got green eyes in everyone here, right? We're still getting a sense of this being the charioteer, right? Lashing the two towers together and taking them up. Then we're getting what I believe with the 7 of discs, where we see all of the colors in, integrated here and with fire added to it. We're getting the 4th, aspect. We're getting the physical body that draws all of this together. So the physical body of the charioteer, again, back to the troublesome paragraph where she says the body, the charioteer, etc., etc., etc. Page 33. What we have here in the 7 of discs is all of those aspects. We have wands and fire. We have water. The air is assumed. We can see its impact on things. And we have the earth. And we have dark and light eclipsing one another, coming together in order to, enlighten. And it's also very chaotic, right? So let's go back and look at how all 4 of these come together as a process. Okay. So if we look at the 7 of wands, it's sort of like saying you can start your class with an A. And that the choices that you make throughout the semester, right, are going to tell you whether you keep your A. We've all seen these teachers that do this, right? I tend to be one of them. I tend to be the one that says, as far as I'm concerned, you're all perfectly successful students. You're going to do beautifully in my class. Let me know if you encounter with difficulties and so forth, so I can help you find a way to lash your 2 horses together and climb towards the sun anyway. So what are those choices? Because you're going to encounter with resistance. Then we see, everything's looking real good at this point, right? Then we introduce this guy. Notice how this one looks directly at us. This one faces this way, and this guy goes low. He's looking below the level of the raven. He's looking right at the level of the raven's wings when you hold them next to each other like this, which to me says, I will take you down, right? This is the level of your body. I will pull you back down. And it is what tends to happen to us, right? This is the white snake. And these are all of the things that, on our spiritual journey, we don't want to look at. We don't want this. We don't want this guy. We don't want to take all of the pain, the suffering, the difficulty, and have to cope with it. It's just, it just feels terrible. It's very frightening. And yet, what does she give us right from the beginning? She's giving us everything we need, right, to be able to go in and cope with this. So she doesn't start us with the heavy part. She gives us the highest possible intentions and capabilities, right, that we can work with. The reason to be able to, literally the reason, and I don't know, you know what I mean? Like the reason in terms of your ability to reason, and then a reason as in a purpose, right? That takes us forward, or a goal. Then she gives us our obstacle. That if we really want to reach that goal, we're not going to be able to do it without encountering with this guy in the process. And the only way to handle him or it is to bring it fully into the fold through acceptance. Once we've come back from that, and she does talk about it extensively in her section on the 7 of Cups. I love this. She starts, it's on page 113. She says, fear keeps you in step with the rest of society. Fear keeps you on the well-worn path in the dark forest. If you conquer your fear and step off the path, you will meet the wolf. Something that I think is important that she also mentions is that she talks about why we need the black horse, right? Why having that black horse or the black wolf is so necessary. And this would be on page 114 or 116. where she's talking about William Blake and his marriage of heaven and hell. If you go a little bit further down, she says, one without the other leaves an ill-balanced chariot without energy, passion, and spirit, or without control, morality, and goodness. So this guy is giving us our energy, our passion, and our, spirit. Energy, lots of energy. Feeling, emotion, depth in the body. Things that literally what our drives are. And without that, this guy can't do much good. And we can't stay in a physical body, right? Because we have to have this. We don't exist without it. Once we've got through that, right, we've discovered both the difficulty, the things that we didn't want to look at about this dog, okay, that big black dog that's on your back, or that causes your depression. We sometimes hear about the depression as being described as like a big black dog. Once we've gotten past that, and we can see then also we can see the helpful parts. The helpful parts become immediately apparent. Once you've done all of these, you've created the situation by which you're bringing all of your elements in your chariot into balance. And now what do you want to do with it? Right? You've successfully created a vehicle that can take you wherever you want to go. Mission accomplished. You've achieved a level of integration that's helpful. So now what? And that's the question being asked in the Seven of Discs. You've gotten this far. You've been this successful. You've accomplished the mission of lashing together your horses and creating a functional vehicle for your own enlightenment. How do you want to make use of it? Sentence. Accomplishing your magnum opus and purpose in life is not the end. Now it is time to go inside. Down. This card says you are the master of your own destiny, that you can get it if you do what is necessary to make it happen. It is up to you. Pray to God, but row for the shore. And then her final question, what will you create now with this chaos in your hands? Okay. And I really love what she says, you're the master of your own destiny. Pray to God, but row for the shore. Don't sit in the boat in the middle of the storm and wait for God to come rescue you. Not going to happen. Right? So in Greek mythology, the heroes in Greek mythology, if they were lucky enough to be related to a god, could get away with almost anything. Because they could literally get themselves, to a certain point, good or bad, and then just sit and wait, and they would be rescued, right? Literally, a chariot of the gods would swoop in, pick them up and collect them, and, take them back up to the gods with them. Literal chariots, and it was called a deus ex machina. So it'd be a machine by which the gods would come and rescue. As human beings, she's telling us that is not possible for us. Okay, it's just not. There is no deus ex machina. If you're in the boat, go ahead and pray, and while you're praying, you row that boat. Row that boat ashore. For example, an example of this would be the play Medea, right? Which is one that always shocks the crap out of modern audiences. It's very hard to sympathize with Medea by the end of it, right? The beginning, we all sympathize with her because Jason has cheated on her. He has a beautiful mistress. Medea finds out about it. She's livid. How could you? How dare you? And what does she do? She poisons the mistress with a dress so that when the mistress puts the dress on, it kills her. It poisons and kills her subdermally. She then kills both of their children. She's related to Helios. So Helios, the sun god, comes down in a chariot, collects Medea after she's done all of this horrible stuff, often with blood on her hands still, and takes her up to the heavens with the gods. Okay? That said, as human beings, we don't have that option. And that's what's being talked about here. And that's why Plato, who was also Greek, is talking about it from this perspective as well, right? The human soul doesn't have all white horses. It only has a white horse, it has a black horse, it has the reason that God gave it, or the gods gave it, and, you know, a body to contain all of that in. And this would be the embodiment of the entire chariot as it has been lashed together successfully. And given that you're stuck here on earth with it, there is the joy of recognizing, yay, I accomplished this much. And then comes the ensuing task, which is, oh shit, I've accomplished this much and I'm still here. So what am I supposed to do? And the answer to that, in a very Zen Buddhist way, would be chop wood, carry water, and meditate. You know, live your day-to-day life, be in your physical body, do what needs to be done. Pray and row for the shore at the same time. So there's success, but there's also potential. Now what? So something that I have found to be incredibly useful that Marie White says after she describes, you know, Plato's chariot in her description of the chariot. So we're on page 33 in either edition. It's in that same paragraph that starts Plato in the first column, but it's about halfway through it. She says the charioteer must balance these energies within himself and drive them with great difficulty into the world of the gods, where he can hopefully glimpse the ultimate truth, if even for a moment, before he once again loses control, as the horses are very difficult to control, and crashes back to earth. Few ever achieve this, and according to Plato, it takes many lifetimes, an old soul with the understanding of an artist or philosopher, to achieve this level of self-knowledge and mastery. To glimpse the ultimate truth, even for a moment, is enough to transform your soul, make you an initiate. Even after you crash, and as a human you will crash, you will be forever changed. And that is ultimately the kind of transformation that she's talking about. So when she says, you know, with the 7 of discs, you know, pray to God, but row for the shore. That's because even if we're able to have that glimpse for a moment of being able to drive that chariot, you know, that high into the sky, so high we think we're touching the sun, we're still going to come crashing back down to earth. We're still going to find ourselves in a body. We don't get the Deus Ex Machina. Okay, there is another video that I made about the 7s, where I was talking a little bit more, I guess, personally and kind of deeply about the 7s and how they relate. I will remember to put a link to that in the description box. It is also on the playlist, so if you go scroll down a little further, it's on the playlist. I might put those in order so they're next to each other. But it's a much older video. It's like from this time last year or a little bit later, maybe May. I'm not sure. I'd have to look. But yeah. All right, folks. Thank you so much, and I will see you again next time for the 8s. Okay. Bye.